Well, we've taken a fun road trip today to Sunshine Nursery in Clinton, and we're visiting with Steve Biebrich. He's the owner, and he's also done a lot of research on elms. And Steve, thank you for letting us come and visit today.
Well, I'm glad you came.
So, now, Steve, elms are really important in the history of Oklahoma and also in the history of the United States. And why has there been a problem with elms?
Well, elms have traditionally been one of the preferred landscape and shade trees in Oklahoma and in the country in general. But after the introduction of the fungus that causes the Dutch elm disease, which actually has caused the death of a lot of the American elms, and also the introduction in the late 50s of the elm leaf beetle, which causes another problem, actually eats the foliage of the elms, they've lost favor due to those two conditions. And so we've actually been looking at ways to solve those problems with disease-resistant elms and also elms that are resistant to the feeding of the elm leaf beetle.
Okay, so now those two problems are actually two completely separate problems.
Yes, one is a fungus. The Dutch elm disease is caused by a fungus spread by the flatbark beetle.
Okay.
And the elm leaf beetle actually is a different beetle that actually just eats the foliage. It really doesn't cause a disease, it just eats the foliage of some species.
So you've got two things then that you're having to deal with the elms.
Yes, two conditions that we're trying to overcome. Plus we also have to look at many of the new Asian species and some of our American species for ornamental characteristics, being able to be cold hardy in all parts of Oklahoma and to have maybe ornamental bark or good looking foliage. So we're actually selecting for good ornamental trees.
Okay. Now, what makes an elm such a great tree for Oklahoma? Why wouldn't you just avoid them altogether and go on to something else? There is something about an elm that's great here, isn't there?
Well, after the problems started showing up, most people did avoid elms. It was kind of like a dirty word for a number of years. But the reason that I've been excited about them, and they're becoming very popular again all over the United States, is because they do well. They are a very tenacious tree that tolerates the high pH and the tough conditions that we have in Oklahoma. So all in all, they're one of our probably easiest to grow species.
Great. Now, what are some of the things, you know, as you're doing research on elms, what are some of the things that you look for? Could we take a look at some of the trees that you're...
Yeah, we can look around. We actually are looking at a number of Asian species, and traditionally the Asian species have less problem with diseases and elm leaf beetle feeding. But some of the things we look for, you know, very good glossy, hard leaves that are very shiny, and this helps to resist the elm leaf beetle feeding. Also, some species like the lacebark elm have very nice, attractive exfoliating bark. This particular tree is a lacebark from Korea, which is very cold hardy and also has disease resistance. And it has fairly nice bark, but what we'd like to do is cross this with some of the more southern Chinese species and even get more attractive bark.
Now, you have some lacebark that actually exfoliate a lot then, don't you?
Yes, we can look at some, we have some that actually just turn bright gold and gray and green that are very attractive.
Okay, let's go see one of those.
Okay. Brenda, this is a selection of lacebark elm that was selected by Mike Durr from the University of Georgia.
Gosh, that's pretty.
I think it has probably one of the most beautiful, attractive exfoliating barks of any of the cultivars. I like this tree very well. We're also looking for some other trees that'll have this good a bark that will perform very well in Oklahoma. And there's other lacebarks, other traits that we're looking for. You know, good resistance to anthracnose. So cold hardiness, beautiful bark, nice foliage, and disease resistance is something we're looking for in lacebarks.
Okay. Now we've kind of looked at the lacebarks, but you're also looking at several other elms, and even some American elms are out there now that are resistant to things.
Yes, let's go look at some of the American elm cultivars that we're looking at. One of them's name is Valley Forge.
See, this is a nice looking tree. How old is this?
This tree's been here about 3 years. This is an American elm cultivar from the National Arboretum. This is some of the work that Dr. Townsend with the National Arboretum did. This cultivar is called Valley Forge.
Okay.
And it's a true American elm. And of course now we're seeing kind of the fall foliage. It's kind of getting ready to go dormant. But this one is actually tolerates the fungus that causes Dutch elm disease.
Okay.
So now we have these new cultivars that we can use American elm.
And go ahead and plant them and they'll survive then.
Yeah. We don't recommend that we fill the whole world full of them, but I think for large places, you know, roadside plantings, parks, arboretums, maybe school campuses, I think that the old huge American elm can really make an addition. There are two other cultivars out of the National Arboretum that tolerate Dutch elm disease fungus, and the other one is called New Harmony and Jefferson.
And Jefferson. Okay, and those are available now. People can purchase those, right?
Yeah, those trees are coming online. There's more of the Valley Forge available than the other two, but they are now becoming available.
Okay. Now you mentioned something there, Steve, that's really very important. Part of our problems were that we had the same tree planted in all our cities, and so when something happened, we lost all of our trees.
Yeah, most arborists now recommend that we don't use over 10 to 15% of any one species in a landscape or a city or any area. So having good diversity, I think, is very important.
Okay. Now you've got one more elm to look at. Is it one of your favorites? Or?
Yeah, I'd like to show you Ulmus propinqua, one of the Chinese species that we're looking at. This is Ulmus propinqua, and one of the names of it is called the chalk-barked elm, and this occurs in northern China on into Russia, and we've seen some literature on it talking about that as it becomes older, it gets a white chalky bark. So we're excited that when these trees get to be mature, we'll see that. The thing we've been most excited about is the fact that this tree has been here for a number of seasons, and we don't see feeding from the elm leaf beetle. And since this is from northern China, we feel like it'll have a great resistance also to the Dutch elm disease. And it's very resilient. It's tolerated our heat and drought. And of course, we're seeing it now as it's getting ready to go into its fall foliage. But it's still a pretty green looking tree, especially, let me show you, compare it to one of these other trees.
Yeah, that'd be good, because we've been looking at these trees and they've looked great. And
we'll
maybe the
compare
viewers like to see what that comparison is.
Yeah.
Now that's very striking.
This is the difference between the Ulmus propinqua, which still looks relatively good, and Ulmus laciniata, another Asian species that's completely defoliated from the elm leaf beetle. So we feel like we may have a winner here.
That looks good. Now this isn't something that's available yet to people, but you know, someday it may be, right?
Yeah, this tree is still very much experimental. There's, matter of fact, my collection, a few in Nebraska, and at the Morton Arboretum in Chicago are the only propinqua that we know of. And so this tree, we're still evaluating it, but I really feel like that within the near future we will make some selections, and this tree will have a new name. We'll give it some kind of a neat name, and it'll be available.
Well, good. Now, we've talked about your research and everything, and there are elms that are out now, though. Of course, we talked about the American elm and the laceworks that people can buy. And what are some of the ones that they would look for if they were looking for a good elm?
Well, right now, the American species and the lacebark species are out there. There are also elms like cedar elm, Ulmus crassifolia, which is a native to southern Oklahoma and Texas. That's an excellent elm. It's more compact. Those are available. Winged elm occasionally is sold in nurseries, and there are mail order nurseries that specialize in unusual cultivars.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate this. This has been very educational and also just fun to see that there is some research going on, and the elm is not